Alex asks, "Hey Brent, can you give your thoughts on oil and what happens in Venezuela? Who and what benefits in the short and long? How would you play it? Thank you." Yeah, this is a fun one
Well,
because
okay, so listen, Venezuela is a huge, huge thing for many, many, many different reasons. So it's funny, I just literally tweeted out in the last hour that Venezuela, it wasn't so much about us capturing the oil so that we can then develop it and sell it and make all this money on it. It's not that it's not about that, and it's not that we won't do that. And I'm sure that will happen to a certain extent. But this idea that we're going to go down there and we're going to start pumping oil and start selling it immediately, that's not going to happen because the infrastructure just isn't there for that. And even some of the companies who would go in and develop are saying, until we get security guarantees, it's almost uninvestable for us. We can't really do it. But what it does do is it keeps other people from developing it, right? And it's a form of control. And the analogy I use is it's like censorship in the physical realm, right?
mm,
If we all say like we like to have free speech, and right now governments around the world are cracking down on free speech. Well, this is kind of the US's way, the global hegemon's way of cracking down on globally supplied oil, right?
mhm,
And they can't control it all. And obviously, Russia is a huge producer of energy. And I don't think we're going in and bombing Russia anytime soon. But the idea that the United States was going to sit back and let China and Russia develop Venezuelan oil and let them control it, just not too far from the United States in the Western Hemisphere.
mhm,
I always knew that was not going to be allowed to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that the US can perfectly control it. And it doesn't mean that, there can't be some blowback. But the idea that the United States would let that happen without trying to stop it, I always knew there would come a point where they would try to stop it. And that point has now been reached. And again, if the US is one of I think the second biggest producer of oil now or energy, second or third, and a big ally is Saudi Arabia. And so now we're sort of in control, not in control, but our allies in control of the in Saudi Arabia. We're in control in North America, and now in control for most of South America. It really just leaves Russia that China is, and China will say, well, we still control Iran, but that's kind of in play now as well.
yeah,
But
mhm,
the point is the United States just took the biggest oil reserves on the planet off the market, right? That is no longer in play for a competitor to develop. So what does that mean in the short term? Does it mean that the United States is going to be able to flood the market with oil and prices are going to fall? I don't necessarily think that. But what it does mean is that the U.S. now controls the biggest reserves on the planet. If you add Venezuela's reserves and the United States reserves, it's they're the biggest producer now, or they're the biggest.
mhm,
They control the biggest reserves, and that's not nothing, right? The fact that they're in control of it, whether they develop it or not, is important. And if you could even think about it, and I said this in the tweet as well, it's kind of like it's kind of like gold reserves, right?
right,
Countries around the world don't want to use their gold reserves, but they might end up having to use their gold reserves. And that's why they keep them, is because maybe that day will come. And if and when that day ever comes, they want to have a bunch of gold. Well, it's just the same way with having a bunch of oil. And so I don't know that it affects the price in the short term, but it's going to allow the US to a certain extent, still have influence on the price of oil globally. And the other thing I'll say while we're on this topic, and I know this wasn't specifically asked, is the oil price is already pretty low. I think it's high 50s. It wouldn't surprise me to see it to get down to $50. If it got below 50, I'd probably start buying it. We own some anyway, but we'd probably be much more aggressively buying it. But one thing I would say is a lot of people will say, you know, as we move into this new world where you know fiat seems to be under attack and Keynesian economics seems to be under attack and tariffs are coming back to be the norm and capital controls will be coming back to be the norm. We're moving into the world where physical goods dominate, you know, fiat goods or securitized financial assets, right? Paper assets. And I feel like there's a lot of certainty around that.
Mhm.
And that's just absolutely going to happen. And it started happening last year, and it's going to pick up speed this year. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It might that I kind of tend to agree with that. But one thing I would point out is this same thing was said 2 years ago, 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the price of oil went to 110 or 20 bucks and natural gas spikes. And the most obvious and clear cut trade in the world was to be long energy because we were now in a new environment and the price of oil was going to go higher. And, the sanctions and all this stuff was going to take supply off the market. And it was a new world. And when Biden started selling from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, they called him an idiot. And, this is the stupidest thing ever. We will never be able to replace that oil at a lower price. And listen, I'm obviously no fan of Biden, but listen, when you look back at it now, Biden sold that oil in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Oil's 50 bucks, 55, 56, 58, somewhere between 55 and $60 now. In hindsight, it's not a horrible trade. Now, some people say, well, they haven't refilled the reserve yet. Well, no, but now they control Venezuela's, right? So I guess my point is, while I think some of these big things are kind of easy to see and how they're going to play out over the next 5, 10, 15 years, 5, 10, 15 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's going to play out in the next 5 months. So I think I don't see unless there's a military conflict on a pretty big scale, which I cannot rule out, and I think you got to be aware of. I don't see the price of oil skyrocketing really soon. Um, but I don't think it's necessarily related to supply coming on from
Mhm.
Venezuela. So anyway, that was a very long-winded answer to that question, but that's kind of my thoughts there.
Tracy,
Yeah, yeah,
Shuchart, she wrote a nice piece on, the Venezuelan oil situation, and,
yeah,
her take on this whole thing was it's more about the rare earths that they have over there, the $7.5 billion whatever that we have for the Pentagon to go.
that's right.
And then she just kinda described the case of the oil situation over there is like, "Hey, this stuff's like asphalt. It's high
Yeah,
sulfur, it's high metals,
yep,
there's a lot of refining involved." That's why a lot of these, oil companies are
yep,
like, "Gross. Gross."
yeah.
You
But
know?
in the but I do think there will be some of it, and so the transporters, is probably and the shippers would probably benefit to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah, offshore oil,
Yeah,
not offshore, but, the shipping supply shipping
yeah,
services,
yeah,
the services
yeah,
is the one big
yeah,
thing Chris was talking about lately.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, "If you wanna play Venezuela, it's probably gonna be more of the service play."
That's totally,
Yeah,
totally agree with him there.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thanks, Alex. Westcott asks, "Please advise the Dow Dividend Aristocrat Fund. You've talked about it in the past. Is it NOBL? Did you actually have you talked about an
I don't
aristocrat
know if that
fund?"
I've talked about that specifically, but I have
Mm,
talked extensively about just buying the big blue chip Dow type
yeah,
names that pay dividends, and I still believe that that is a great way to go, especially
yeah.
if if you're trying to preserve a portfolio. I think that's a great way to go. If you're really trying to, if you're young and you're really trying to,
Swing for the
outperform the
fences.
market every year and really trying to grow, maybe there's some other opportunities. But if you're, as certainly as a key part of a portfolio, I think that's what I do for a lot of my clients, and that's what I plan to continue to do.
Yeah, yeah. Did you hear about that chemist on, YouTube that cracked the Coca-Cola formula? He used
Yeah.
chemistry and broke it every
Really,
ingredient in Coca-Cola. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
and it's real.
It's real. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, you got to
yes.
send me that. Send me
Yeah,
that.
okay. I'll track it
Yeah,
down and give it to you, but it's pretty
yeah,
funny because everybody's like, "What? Don't get suicided, bro."
yeah. Right. I mean, that's
It
God. That's like a national treasure.
that's a trade secret right there.